Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to uh, introduce Dr. Biplab Banerjee, currently an assistant professor at CSRE. Uh, he had a wonderful academic record all along, and we were lucky that he first joined CSRE as a PhD student, even though he could have joined any computer science department because of his machine learning talents. He graduated in 2015, then proceeded to Europe for postdoctoral work, returned to India and joined as assistant professor at IIT Roorkee. After spending a couple of years there, he moved to IIT Bombay, where he joined CSRE in 2018 summer. And since then, he had been performing tremendously well uh, as a researcher, instructor, supervisor, and and he's also done a lot of outreach work, whether it is editorial work for journals or you know advising companies. He also had several visiting assignments at different places uh, outside India, and it's my honor that I was also associated with him as his PhD
Yeah,
supervisor.
I was going to say that actually.
So many congratulations, Biplab, that you are selected for this award. And incidentally, his PhD work also was given the Excellence in Thesis Award by IIT Bombay. So over to Professor Biplab Banerjee.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So you have been lucky for me to get award actually. Okay, so I hope my slide is visible.
Not yet. Yeah, now it
Okay,
is.
okay, fine. Just a minute. Yeah. So thank you everybody, and thank you IIT Bombay and IRCC for selecting me for this prestigious award. So what I will do, I will talk about our current research under the scope of what we call learning under limited supervision, and the works have been mostly conducted by my PhD students, and so thanks to all of them and the funding agencies and the companies I'm associated with. So a big thanks to all of them. Okay, so when we talk about machine learning, probably the supervised learning is the one that we all know. And in traditional supervised learning, what we assume that we have substantial amount of level training data, and the distribution that governs the training and test data, they are highly identical. And this is basically known as the pack assumption of statistical learning theory. But anyway, the data could be single modal or multimodal. That doesn't matter as long as the two assumptions they hold. But there are certain problems that getting annotations are not always easy, so it's a laborious process, and the annotations or labeling that might change over time, so this is not entirely a static process. Apart from that, nowadays, like when we talk about a real life implementation of a machine learning system at a large scale, we cannot ensure that we get the same type of data always. So there can be a substantial distribution difference between the training and test data, in which case like our standard classifiers are going to fail. So how can we deal with those situations? On the other hand, the humans are extremely good in learning from very limited supervision, and if there is some change in the data distribution, right? So if we see any color image and we have to generalize over some sketch images, so humans are good at doing that. But how can we train a machine to do that thing? So all these things actually motivated us to take up this research direction of doing machine learning under limited supervision. So there are a couple of directions that we have been working into this
Sorry,
particular.
Biplab, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. I think we are still on the first slide.
Oh,
Can you make it
really?
full screen? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Just a minute. Let me reshare it again. Sorry. So is it fine now? Is it changing?
Yes, perfect. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sure. So with this background, so we have been working into multiple directions where we can model machine learning systems which are trained with limited training data, and there could be some violation of this distribution, that identity problem. Now, there are a couple of questions that need to be answered for this. So, from limited data, how can we learn good representation? How can we ensure that we learn invariant representation given multiple data distribution? Uh, in many cases, we can actually overlook the problem of limited data by introducing side information. So this is what we call multimodal learning. So can multimodality help in doing this kind of task? And the other point is that, like, when we read something or when we do some task, maybe some another cooperative task might help in the process. Okay, so can we do this what we call multitask learning to take care of this level scarcity problem? So with all these motivations and research direction, so I'm going to talk about two research problem that two of my students who graduated or submitted the pre-synopsis they worked with. The first one is called zero shot learning, and the second one that I'll be talking about is what we call domain adaptation or transfer learning. So zero shot learning basically is what we call identifying the unknown, because here I mean, we train on certain classes, but during testing we're going to see totally different set of classes. So let us just define the problem. Assume that we have these four categories during training a machine learning system, and we have enough label training data for each of the four categories. Now, during testing, I show these images. Of course, they have certain visual similarity with the training data, but they are very rare in nature, right? So if I show these images during testing and say, just let me know what are the classes. So this is very difficult. Uh, on the other hand, if I show this images of these four classes, and at the same time I give this side information, and I say that okay, there exist some categories called heartbeats, elephant, shoe, or Tasmanian tiger, which have this kind of properties. So this is purely textual information regarding the test data or the test classes, but I do not show any visual images for them. Given this situation, now it becomes quite easy for us to associate the class names to each of these categories, right? So human can do this. I mean, if we are given some textual information regarding some visual class, even without seeing some visual example, we can still able to recognize that. But can we incorporate this learning paradigm to computer? So that's the main problem of zero shot learning. So if we compare it to the standard supervised learning, so we have some training classes, we have some test classes, and we call them seen and unseen, and they're completely disjoint. The extra information that we have in ZSL is the side information, which is the class prototype or class description, which is basically some textual information that describe the property of a certain class. And for each class, we have only one single vector representative, representing this properties. In terms of mathematical definition and what we need to do, so we have some label training data during training. We have some prototypes for each class, and of course we have some labels because these are the supervised information. But we only have the visual data, and we have the prototypes. But of course we do not have the labels. Neither the prototypes and the images, they are paired. Under this scenario, what we need to do, we need to learn some sort of mapping from the visual space to the semantic space. So it's not that visual to label mapping that we do in supervised learning. So this has to be from the visual to the semantic space. And since the semantic space is kind of shared between the seen and unseen category, we can assume that if we learn a good mapping between these two spaces during training, so they are going to generalize for the unseen classes during testing. So there are two flavors of the problem. The first one is called traditional ZSL, where during testing we can only see unseen class data. There could be generalized ZSL, where during testing we can see samples from the seen and unseen both the classes. Of course, they are all unlabeled, but this is more generic scenario where any class data could be seen during the testing phase. Now, we started our work with the development of a discriminative model for this purpose. So basically, given the visual and semantic information, we need to learn a common latent space where, the text feature as well as the image feature that should come close to each other. It has to be discriminative, for which we propose something called a cross-domain triplet loss, as mentioned here. So this basically brings the same class text and image closer and different class text and image far from each other. And at the same time, in order to ensure that the model doesn't get biased towards the scene class, we propose something called the graph regularity in the semantic space. So we have the usual graph structure that says that, okay, semantically these two classes are neighbor, and we want this information to be propagated to the latent space so that the latent space is also semantically meaningful. And for that purpose, we developed a graph regularizer, and the entire model with all the loss functions like the alignment loss, the triplet loss, as well as this graph regularization loss. So they are end-to-end trainable, and hopefully we get some model out of it. So experimentally, these are the benchmark data sets on which we experiment. And as you can see, these are natural data set. This could be coarse grained or fine grained. For example, in flower, you have different categories of flower, and the benchmark training test split everything are provided. Given that, as you can see, like both for the ZSL as well as the generalized ZSL setup, so we could be able to beat the standard literature. In the next case, we deal specifically the GZSL problem because this is the tough one. As we can see anything during testing, both samples from the seen and unseen classes, but of course we do not know. And the model is highly biased towards the seen classes because that is the training data. So for this purpose, what we do, our idea was like given a test sample, can we apply some hypothesis and just do a quick inference whether that is basically a seen class sample or unseen class sample. So if we can do this segregation, then subsequently all the seen class samples can be treated as a supervised learning problem because we already have the training data for them, and we do ZSL only for the unseen class sample. So if we can break this up, then the model bias towards the seen classes greatly reduces. With this idea, we propose the notion of what we call domain classifier, and that is actually given the job to classify between the seen and unseen test data on the fly. But the question is, how can we generate the domain classifier? Because during training, we only have some known class data, seen class data. So there is nothing unseen during training. So what we do, we apply some generative deep learning model like GAN to synthesize something called a pseudo unseen visual class data. So given a seen class sample, we want to generate some new samples which are unseen, which is different from that data distribution. And if we can generate such pseudo unseen class data, then I can easily train the domain classifier, to discriminate between the known and unknown class samples. With this idea, so you can see this visual. So the red and green are the seen class data, and using the generative model, we could generate these blue samples, of course, which is out of distribution, and the domain classifier is entitled to separate between them. And if they can separate between the red green from the blue samples, of course, like I can say that with high confidence, any unseen class data it should be able to classify. And after classification during inference, what do you do? For all the seen samples, I just do a simple supervised learning, and for the unseen samples, I do ZSL with the unseen this prototypes. And with this module, what we found that we are able to beat on almost all the literature substantially. And the good part is that when you include this domain classifier with the other standard zero-shot learning techniques, we find always that they boost the performance significantly. So this kind of speaks about this pre-processing to help in the zero-shot learning process. After that, we wanted to extend our horizon. So we did not want to do classification. Rather, we moved to the retrieval problem. And this is a very interesting problem, what we call zero-shot sketch-based image retrieval. So where, we know typical image retrieval, right? So in Google, we either write a text or we upload some image and we want the retrieved images. But in this case, what happens if the query image is a sketch and we want to retrieve all the color images for that? Okay, so this is very interesting problem because if you want to search for something, we can quickly draw something in our mobile or tablet, which should be in the sketch format, and we want to retrieve the relevant data. Now, when we talk about zero-shot SBIR, then again we have some seen classes and we have some unseen classes during testing, and the seen and unseen classes, they are actually disjoint. So there is no intersection between them. So for this purpose, the problem actually is a bit different from the zero-shot classification. So for the scene classes, we have sketch, image, the class label, and the class prototype, similar to that. But for the test data, we have only sketch and image. Of course, they are unpaired. But here during testing, we do not use the class prototype because finally we want to match the sketch and image data. So, the prototype doesn't play a big role out here. Okay, so that's the only difference from the previous problem setup. So here, I mean, the problem is a little bit more critical because sketch and image are like very different entities. So first we need to do some sort of feature alignment between them. And at the same time, it has to be a very discriminative kind of mapping so that all the class specific sketch and image should come close to each other. And of course, we have to maintain the semantic consistency. And again, we use some graph convolution based network for that. So this is the entire architecture. So we align the feature. So basically given some CNN backbone, the convolution network backbone to extract features, we do what we call multi-level feature alignment at the mid-level as well as at the very high level. Then we have what we call this information bottleneck principle. So we came up with a triplet solution for that. That should bring the same class sketch and image close to each other, and subsequently it will bring them close to the corresponding class prototype. And the graph regularize the semantic loss. This is basically a graph neural network, and that would ensure the semantic consistency of the original semantic space and the latent space. So I would like to show some visual results. So I mean, this is the previous model. So here, of course, you can see that there are certain classes which come in every retrieval. So this is what we call hoops, and this is a problem in any retrieval task. And with our model in the second column, as you can see, I mean, we get more or less fine retrievals for different sketch categories. And quantitatively also, we could be able to beat the other methods in terms of the standard mean average precision, precision at 200, all the standard metrics. Okay, so now coming to the second part of this talk. Uh, I mean, this is kind of motivated here. The sketch and image, for example, these are completely different entities, and it's very difficult to do any inference unless we align those features. Now, this alignment of domains is a very well studied problem in machine learning.
Sorry, Biplab,
Yeah,
I hate to interrupt. I think I would appreciate if you could slightly accelerate and.
sure. Yeah, I have only 4 or 5 slides left.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So in this adaptation process, as you can see here, like we have the training data, what you call the source domain, and the test data, they're very different. Like this is some other example. So as you can see, I mean, these are all like different domains. So sketch, clipart, quick draw, all these are very different. So if you train on one bunch and try to test on the other, this is going to be a catastrophe for any supervised learning algorithm. So here we need to align the features, and then only we can do classification. So here we actually worked on this specific scenario, what we call multi-source open set adaptation. Assume we have multiple different label data sets, and we have only one unlabeled target data set. But in this target data set or the test data set, we can have unknown samples. So I have two tasks. How can we classify the target known class samples properly, and how I can reject any unknown target sample? So this is a new problem definition that you proposed. And so we started with this idea of what you call multi-source adversarial domain adaptation. So basically, first we align all the source domains into something called a pseudo source domain. And then we apply this adversarial learning technique so that, the unseen class target domain data should be aligned with the source domain properly. So first we tried the scenario where, of course, the target also shared the same set of classes, what you call a closed set adaptation scenario. And this is some experimental result for that. And after that, we propose this new problem definition of multi-source open set adversarial scenario. Here also we do this is something what we want. I mean, class-wise, all the source and target domain samples should be aligned, and all the unknown class samples should be pushed far apart from the support. So we proposed this adversarial learning strategy for that. So I should quickly go into that thing. So here the only thing is that typically, when we do this kind of classification, so we have a one-hot labeling, right? So for one class or one domain, the label is 1. For other class, it is 0. But here we put the ground truth to be 0.5. So in the adversary, we either want to increase the probability for the open set or the closed set. Okay, so in this way, this separation is done basically. And of course, I'm not going into the training strategy, but it's an alternate optimization that should solve the minimization and maximization problem in the adversary simultaneously. So this is some example. As you can see here, I just put the TSNE of the data points. So the colors differ in different domains, and the green are actually the open set data, unknown class data. So from here, with this process, we learn a new feature space where, as you can see, all the classes, known classes are overlapped. They're properly aligned to each other, and all the unknown class data, so they form a different cluster. Okay, so in this way, we can align the domains and just reject anything which is unknown. So this was the two works mainly. So you're doing other works in this area. For example, you've been working on multitask learning, the few shot learning using a separate modality to compensate for the lack of supervision. You know, how we can hallucinate the unknown thing, or I mean, which is not seen during training. Okay, using what you call the hallucination network. So these are some other areas of work in learning under limited supervision. Yeah, so that's it. So any questions or something?